Good morning, everybody. Oh, yep, that's on. Hi, how was everybody today? Did anyone do the yoga, the sunrise yoga? That looked amazing. First time at a conference where I've seen a sunrise yoga on the schedule, and I was really jealous. So next time I'll be a part of that. Thank you all for having me today. That says, yep, serial tech entrepreneur. So it's just cut off on my screen, so I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't aerial tech entrepreneur. But very different industries. So I'm really excited to be here today and present to you what has been a crazy, volatile, a lot of ups and downs, and mostly not getting any sleep for the last 8 years, but it's paid off to where I am today, which is working with amazing people in the industry and having global companies. I also just have to say sorry because I did catch a cold a few days ago. Probably best that I'm up here standing here instead of talking to all of you face to face. I always refer back to my journey as being like the Remarkables, and I go to Queenstown often to kind of unwind, so 2 days out of the year. And while I'm there, I sit and look at the Remarkables and go, okay, well, the mountain goes up and down so many times, and that's been really reflective of how my journey's been. But my parents came to New Zealand from Istanbul in 1997. I was 4 years old, so very similar to Jeriel. And we landed on the Friday, and my parents put me into kindergarten on Monday. They did not mess around. But I still remember this one key point was, on the journey here from Istanbul, I still remember my mum kissing the tarmac as we landed in Nelson. And only because we'd been travelling for 36 hours. We took a flight from Auckland, Wellington, Nelson, and somehow didn't get the memo that Wellington was the windiest city in the world. And we were in those little ATR planes with the propellers. First time travelling and first time travelling aboard. It was definitely jumping in the deep end if anyone has ever seen it. They came for a holiday, so my uncle and auntie were here and my 2 cousins. And they thought it would be a really good opportunity for us to spend some time with my other cousins and to see what New Zealand was like, because they'd been here for 2 years. That was 22 years later, and here I am. I went to Nelson College for Girls. I went to the prep in Nelson, and then I went on to the high school later on. And it wasn't until I was probably in year 9 that I wanted to do something for myself, but I just didn't know what that looked like. I also did the Asian 5, so my parents very nicely got me to do English, mathematics, biology, chemistry, and I chose one elective, which was drama. This made it very difficult trying to choose a career later on. And I still remember sitting in the careers hub at Nelson College for Girls and filling out a piece of paper that would spit out what my career choices could look like. And the drama part of it basically spat out that I should be in performing arts. And that's just absolutely not what I would want to be doing, even today. But it was also funny because I spoke at my high school a few months ago, and I was reading out my report cards from my teachers, and it was really funny. My English teacher said in my year 11 speeches that it would actually be ideal if I turned up to the speeches exam, internal, and that public speaking would serve me very well in the future. But actually, because I was so terrified of public speaking then, I didn't even turn up to my internal exam, which is very ironic now that I'm standing in front of all of you. She was also in the crowd when I was speaking, and looking at her while she was laughing with tears down her face was, just from laughing so much, was hilarious. But the things that I learned in Nelson College for Girls actually shaped who I was. And one teacher said to me very early on in my schooling career, he looked at me and said, "You could do a lot by not procrastinating. You're the best procrastinator that I've ever seen in my 25 years of teaching." And he looked at me and he said, "Stop it. Just stop procrastinating. When you have an idea to do something, or when you get an assignment, count to 3 and go for it." And that one small piece of advice in my year 9 class has served me so greatly to this day. I often count to 3 and just get into it. And procrastinating is a thing of the past, although sometimes I like to leave things to the last minute, but don't we all? It's human nature. I went through Nelson College for Girls. I decided that after my NCA level exams in my last year that I would move to Wellington. So I picked up my bags, I picked up my car, and I was leaving the house, and my mum goes, "Where are you going?" I said, "Oh, I'm going to Wellington." She goes, "You just finished school yesterday. Why are you leaving?" I said, "Nelson's too small for me. I need to go and spread my wings in the big city." She goes, "Oh, do you have any money?" I said, "Yeah, I've got $1,000, Mum. It's a lot." Joke's on me. I went to Briscoe's that day to get some sheets, and they were $130. I've never been more disappointed in my entire life. I slept sheetless for weeks. So that was a really big come to reality moment. But I wanted to take my gap year. I was determined that I would be independent, that I could find a flat, find a job, and that this gap year was going to serve me so greatly because I did not know what I wanted to do after high school. It was by far the most stressful and anxious moment of my life because I was being pressured from every single corner of my life to pick a career, either go to university or pick another career path. And I still remember that anxiety so greatly. So I did my gap year, couldn't find a job for 4 months. That was the hardest time of my life. That $1,000 didn't even last me a couple of weeks. And my parents helped me through that whole process, which I'm still so grateful for today. And they still have continued to support me, even doing things like just my laundry, because I haven't been able to do it in the last 2 months. My poor mum, she just honestly, my parents have been so supportful. And going through that process, it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me a lot about how you need to have a plan. It taught me a lot about being an adult very quickly. And so at 18, I felt like I'd already seen a lot in the 4 months where I couldn't find a job and stuck in Wellington, thinking that I'd be able to spread my wings in this big old city. Felt like a village after a while, but it wasn't until I went to Turkey that everything changed for me. So I always say that I was probably a very bad daughter. I was a very bad student. I was always the one that would raise their hand, but it got to the point where it was so annoying that my teachers would go, "Oh, here we go, she's got another opinion." And I would constantly be raising my hand thinking that I knew everything. But that confidence kind of, it helped me along. And it wasn't until I went to Turkey for 3 months with my family to reconnect with my roots. But one big major problem that I found was going to these museums and paying €70 for an audio device that 160 other million people had worn that day probably. And the experience in the museums wasn't great either. So I had this really big frustration travelling in Turkey, doing my big gap year, and coming back to New Zealand to start my computer science degree at Vic Uni. That was short-lived. That computer science degree was from the idea and fact that I wanted to create websites and apps and technology that lots of people could use. I wanted to expand the barriers and go beyond what was capable just by being in one country, but I wanted to reach people globally. Computer science wasn't that. So very stark realization. If you want to learn Java, which is a very old computer science language, then computer science is absolutely for you. Definitely was not for me, and I was one of 3 girls in a class of 500. I only want to make that really clear because it's still the case today. There's still a very big ratio of male to female in development industries, and it's interesting because I was talking to a developer from IBM, and she's been a developer for 40 years, and she said, "Ezel, in the 80s there were so many female developers. You know, it was booming. There were so many in my classes. There were so many at university, but now for whatever reason, there's no females doing computer science degrees and STEM degrees." And I often think about this. Why have we not seen more female developers coming through? And it really starts at us. So I didn't go into development for no other reason than one of my friends was a developer and I saw what he could do. But my parents to this day still don't know what I do. And it wasn't until I started my first company story where my mum looked at me and she said, after I left my computer science degree, obviously, I dropped out. And by the time I dropped out, the two other girls had also dropped out. But it wasn't until I showed my mum this app when she said, "What are you doing now?" And I said, "Mum, we've built this app called Story." And she goes, "Oh, so the thing that you've been working on for the last year is an app?" I said, "Yep, you can download it." And she goes, "Okay, don't tell me anything else." She's like, this makes it all worth it. But still to this day, if I ask her what her favourite and most proud moment is, she says, seeing you walk down the Victoria University Hill in a backpack, and that is her most proud moment. I took her to Japan for a Forbes interview, and that's still her most proud moment. And just a side note, I'm the only person in my family that does not have a degree. My brother has his master's in economics. My mum has also her master's in economics, and my dad has his degree in economics. And I do not. And they still push me to go to university to this day. And I will one day too absolutely appease them and give them the degree. But the journey that I've been on thus far has been very, very educational anyway. And I'd like to think that I'd have an honorary degree one day. Here's hoping. So, Story. I started Story when I was 18 years old, not knowing anything. My experience was very limited. It was limited to the point where I was washing dishes in my gap year after I found a job in Wellington. But I had this urge and this passion to develop a product that I knew could reach the masses, and museums are a great way to do that. We started Story in 2011. So I was 18, heading on 19 at that point, and only because Te Papa had released an RFP. So they released a tender and they said, we would like to build an app for Te Papa where anyone could download the app and go around the museum and find out more information about the pieces that they were looking at. And I sat and looked at my co-founder who was with me at the time. We said, well, why can't this work for everybody? Not every single museum in the world has $200,000 to be throwing at an application. And this was the big app boom at that point. So there was already 1 billion apps in the store at that time when we were creating Story. And that's a heck of a lot, especially for any one person to download. We spread a lot of pieces of paper all around the floor. We drew wireframes and we said, if the user downloads this app, they're in a new city, they're a local, they're an international visitor. What would that look like? And what we had in front of us was the start of a company. We didn't know it then, but that was the start. We then went to Wellington Zoo before going to Te Papa, and we said, if we build this application, would you use something like this? And they looked at us and said, we've got so much content. We spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on content every single year, but we've got no way to show our users this. So we had a customer that had a problem. We had what we thought was a solution, and we knew that the museum market was big. We didn't know it was as big as we thought, though. There are more museums in the US than Starbucks and McDonald's combined. So there's hope in humanity, which is great. There are also more attendees to museums and all theme parks and live sports games combined as well. The market that we were about to approach was absolutely massive. It was a behemoth of an industry, and an industry that I'm still working in today. We developed the Story app, and with our first customer, Wellington Zoo, we then went to sign on 200 other museums across the world. We work with the likes of the Getty, the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. We then diversified our platform, so we went from a storytelling app where the museum could put in all of the audio and text and images and videos, to diversify into indoor mapping and wayfinding. So how people move around a venue. Can we give mothers who have prams or accessible routes to visitors? Could we give them the shortest path to the Mona Lisa and then ask them to stand in a crowd looking at a tiny piece of art? Could we then go into airports? And we did. So we went and worked with LAX and Atlanta Airport and SeaTac, helping visitors and travellers move through an airport in the most efficient way. Because if any of you have been to American airports, it is like the labyrinth. And so we would give users times on how long they'd be standing in security and the quickest route to their gate. And then as they went along that path, we would give them notifications if they really liked McDonald's or really liked some other restaurant. We would be able to give them discounts and things like that. We then diversified again into ticketing. So in the 4 years that we did Story, we had over 60 staff. We were in 5 different countries, we had offices in 3 different countries, and we were working with over 500 customers, and we raised over $10 million globally. All this from being self-taught. I was relentless, and I had a very, very bad experience when I started so early on, and it's still ingrained in my personality, but also now, but also in my memory. We were speaking in front of an investor, and he asked to come on our board, and we said, yes, we'd love to have you on our board. And so we had our very first board meeting, and I'll never forget this. He looked at me and he said, tell me what Story is in 30 seconds. So I took a moment to think, and then he looked at my business partner and said, you need to get a new business partner. She doesn't know what the heck she's doing. That was so ingrained in me, that moment, and I felt angry, and I hadn't really slept because we'd been working all night, and so I used that anger and passion to go, actually, I do know what I'm doing, and I do know for an 18-year-old that if anything, I've got the passion to do what needs to be done. I would spend all day working, to the point where I would leave at 10 o'clock at night and then go and watch tutorials or do online courses on how to do P&L spreadsheets, the HR laws in New Zealand, how to be a good product manager. I did every single project management course you could absolutely ever think of. And a month later went into a board meeting and asked my co-founder not to come and facilitated the whole thing. He later apologised, which I'm very thankful for, because otherwise I would have been a very angry girl. But that experience helped me upskill in more ways than one. And the biggest passion that I found was in project management. So I was a technical project manager in Story for 4 years, while I also did sales. The biggest learning curve for me, though, was, and going into the deep end, was the fact that I would do 200 cold calls every single day to museums all around the world. So I'd do 200 calls. Of that, about maybe 3 would convert into a follow-on meeting. And I remember calling this one lady named Debbie. She got so frustrated every time I called her that I could hear her eyes rolling on the other side of the phone every time. Say, hi, Debbie, it's Ezel. And she'd say, who? Say, Debbie, it's Ezel from Story, the app. And she goes, oh, it's you again. So yes, it is. We've got a new feature out. She's like, I know, you said that last time. I was like, well, Debbie, you'd love to have a product like this. I know it'd do wonders for the organisation. She said, if you call me again, I'm going to block your number. And I said, okay, Debbie, I'll speak to you again in a few weeks' time. And she'd go, ah, and she'd hang up the phone. We ended up getting that contract, which was very interesting, and we did change a lot in the organisation. But the relentlessness as an 18-year-old to get that contract was, I feel, most of the time annoying, but also very, very purpose-driven. I grew up really quickly because of that, and leading a team of 45 developers allows you to build up traits that you wouldn't be able to learn in university. We ended up selling Story in 2015. We split off all of our products, the ticketing, the indoor mapping and wayfinding, and our storytelling platform, and we were able to sell it in the United States and New Zealand. The Story app was then again sold last year, which is interesting, but we spent so much money and time. We invested over $4 million into the Story app. and it's still helping a lot of users today navigate the tourism market, but also engaging with the curiosity that people have, and that's what we wanted to build with technology. So, one company wasn't enough. So in that time in 2015, I said, okay, well, how about we start another company called Non-Stop Ticks? One of our competitors was bought out by a big multinational, and there was a gap in the market for a boutique ticketing platform. So I asked one of our developers to help me on the side, and he helped us build a ticketing platform in 40 hours, so in 1 week. This was the most basic ticketing platform you could ever think of. So you want to go to a festival or a gig, you buy your ticket, you get your ticket. There was nothing else. And after I left Story and after we sold the company, we decided that actually there was still a really big need in the market for a ticketing platform like this. We did a lot of user research and put a little bit more capability around the technology, but again that was short-lived because we ended up selling it to a local promoter that year, within 1 year of actually being in the company full-time. I then took another small break, so I took a month off, and one of my customers called me and she said, I thought you had a ticketing platform, we were just about to use it, but I've seen that you've sold it. I said, yep. What can I do for you though? So tell me things. And she said, Ezel, we built our platform, we built our ticketing platform for our show and museum a very long time ago, and it's resting on the shoulders of one developer. And if anything ever happened to this one developer, we would be in a very, very bad position. So I said, okay, well, can you give me a year and I'll build you one of the best ticketing solutions? She said, I'll give you 2 years. And we'll help you along the way. So that was the concept for Passphere, which is my current company. We've been developing Passphere for 2 years. And right from conception to where it is now, where it's commercial, this is a behemoth of a platform. It's going up against the likes of Ticketmaster, Ticketek, companies that are making over $10.8 billion annually globally. We are seen as a technology provider and a software provider in this space. And only because of the relentless pursuit of wanting to solve a problem, which is ticketing globally. And I'm very happy to say that we've just closed we'll just be closing another funding round. So we raised around $1 million before Christmas, which is in a couple weeks, which is crazy. But the amount of interest and support that we're getting around the country has been phenomenal. And we're working with the likes of graduate software engineers, both female and male, who are in our company building this technology. We're upskilling them. We're putting around senior developers that will help them. And they're the most malleable, passionate, young people coming into our industry, and we don't do it based on a degree, we do it based on skill. So any developer or any employee that comes, we always ask them what they do in their spare time and what they're passionate about. We don't look at their qualifications, because I know from my experience that qualifications aren't necessarily the thing that drives passion. It's yourself, it's your tenacity, it's how you self-motivate, it's how you manage your time. And Passphere is on track currently and now to be a global ticketing platform by early next year. One more time. There we go. So we're a nation of experienced collectors preferring to do things rather than accumulate things. Our generation and our generation are wanting to collect experiences. We can't afford houses anymore, so we like to use our disposable income on things like events and going to museums and creating memories. And that's what we're in the business of as technology creators, is in the currency of experience. And that's why ticketing is such an amazing industry to be in. And it's very ironic, because in the last 7 years I haven't bought a ticket to anything, which is just so ironic. But we are a nation of creators and creative thinkers, and the ability for us to continue to grow our events ecosystem and our arts and culture sector here in New Zealand and abroad, is a really key focus point for us at Passphere. One more time. There we go. Scale fast, fail fast. One of the biggest things that I grew up with, and it was always very common in my family, that failing wasn't an option. So it was always straight A's or nothing. And that created two sides of me as a young person. One, a very anxious young person growing up, but also one where my ability to understand what I'd achieved and not achieved was very greatly skewed. My whole definition of being successful was the mark that I got on my exam or my test. And that simply wasn't the case. I urge young people now to fail and make mistakes and learn while you make those mistakes. It's what we do after that happens, which determines how we deal with bigger life experiences later on. It's the problem-solving element. So how quickly do we problem solve? How quickly can we see an issue and go, okay, I know the steps, or I'm going to find the steps to be able to figure out how to make a really bad situation a great situation, to the point now where my ability to handle the world crumbling is actually quite funny. One of my advisors said to me the other day, he said, Ezel, for any person outside looking in, from the outside looking in, it would look like you're going through the worst period of your life. 7 things have just gone wrong in the space of a month. How are you dealing with this? How are you sleeping? And I said, well, the thing with my life is that everything's happened for a reason, and I wouldn't change a single thing from where I've been to where I am now. But it's only the ability to look at the uncertainty, to look at the what's around the corner and go, I don't need all the answers now, but I will make the journey and the process to be able to achieve an outcome. So I look at a problem now and I never see it as the dead end. And I think that's what separates entrepreneurs out from just your average person, because our ability to look at the world crumbling around us but to still make something happen against all the odds is somewhat scary, but also traits that we have built on for the back of resilience. And one thing that I will say is the amount of resilience that I've been able to build up has only been from failing fast, because we scaled so quickly. There we go. Appetite for risk. We look at an option. So somebody said to me, Ezel, there's no way that you'll be able to get the Smithsonian on board. They've got 7-year cycles, 7-year budget cycles. You won't even be able to get a meeting with them. And so I'm sitting at this conference and I look at the person next to me and it's got the CTO of Smithsonian Aerospace. I stuck to that man like glue for the rest of the conference. Everywhere he went, I was there. Everywhere. He'd go to the bar, I'd be at the bar too. He would be at a lecture, I'd be at a lecture. He was at a speaking arrangement like this, and I was sitting right next to him again. Stuck to this man like super glue. And it wasn't until the 3rd day where he goes, okay, so what do you do? Got him. And I said, I own a technology platform. And he goes, okay, tell me more about this. And I was like, yes, okay, here's my card, let's talk. And we went into the Smithsonian a few months later and gave a big pitch around our technology, but also that we could give it to them for free. All we wanted was their content, and that was much more valuable to us than any contract size that we'd be getting. But we ended up doing the storytelling platform and the indoor mapping and wayfinding, and it was a case study that a small New Zealand company at that time was able to achieve on the global stage. But it was only that appetite for risk that allowed us to get into that space. So you can only achieve things for the time that you put in. And looking at what we could do with very limited money back then, very small team, being in New Zealand, which is geographically sometimes difficult, but wanting to put risk into the stratosphere and go, what can we make from this? I urge a lot of companies now, I urge a lot of individuals and especially schools and larger corporates on what is the appetite for risk here? And can we quantify that the risk that we're taking, can we quantify that into a meaningful result? And I challenge you all to put a little risk in the air and say, what can we really achieve by putting everything out on the table and make the most impact? Because we do things in a very high risk intensity, the outcomes are a lot bigger, but also the failures are a lot bigger too. So my day-to-day life goes between being on the edge of caution, but high risk. So we never do anything at 10%. We always go full velocity. The new currency and what really matters. I look at technology now and I look at what we can change, and it's what really matters and the technology that we're creating that can change what really matters. And that's the important thing, is that we want to create technology as young people that will change the world. And we're seeing that a lot, especially in the Young Enterprise Trust as well. We're seeing young people look at what really matters. And the amount of companies that are coming out with a social good change has been incredible. So, buying a product and having another product go to a charity, or a percentage of those proceeds going to somebody else or another company or people in need. We're seeing the change now. And so what do we look at as a society and go, how can we create an option and a product or an opportunity that will change the world? And so the new currency isn't just revenue on the bank or dollars in the bank account. It's creating technology on what really matters. And what really matters for us is technology that will help event organisers and attendees go to their favourite events. What a lot of you wouldn't know but have probably heard of is Viagogo. So it's a $15 billion issue annually. So every year $15 billion is essentially scammed, and most frequently it affects young families. This is a big issue that we want to be tackling, and we are tackling head on. But that's what really matters to us. We want to be able to provide a platform for young families to go to their favourite events and for people to go to their favourite events. So it's not just how much revenue are we making this year, it's actually making a change in the industry, and we're seeing that a lot more. So where are we at now? We've created this platform called Passphere. We work with a lot of amazing customers, and I think it all goes back to being that young person in Nelson, being that young person with a family who's just come from Turkey, not knowing anybody. It's quite funny because my first words in kindergarten were, "That's mine," and "Have a look." I think that served me quite greatly, because I can go into a meeting now and talk with a customer and say, what are your needs? What problems are you facing? How can we help you? And that level of attention isn't happening anymore. So that human interaction that we can have from a empathetic perspective, and actually understanding what their problems and wants and needs are, is by far the best value and by far the best human trait that you can have, just empathizing with that person and what their needs are. And Passphere is just that. So this is developed by our customers, for our customers, and we don't hide the fact that we will create technology and the features and things around them that facilitate and help their needs. We give them things like data and analytics. So again, this is built by them. We do very intensive workshops and think tanks, and then develop it. So it's always under-promising and over-delivering. And it's again something that I learnt very early on, is having an idea and a vision and then going full steam ahead to achieve that. And thank you. I just want to leave you all with, it's been, this country in New Zealand has given my family and myself so much. And coming into New Zealand as a young person at 4 years old and going through the schooling system was by far the most rewarding but also challenging times in my life too. And oftentimes I didn't feel supported, but I had amazing teachers and amazing people guiding us through that journey, and myself through that journey, that has helped shape me into the person that I am today. Oftentimes stubborn, I don't take no for an answer, and I'm relentless to the point of annoyance. But that all wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have gone to the schools that I had and the teachers that had helped me along the way. So I just urge you to spark that curiosity that we see in our young people today, that no isn't always an answer, and that if they do see a problem, give them the tools to be able to solve those problems quicker and more efficiently and smarter as well, but then also having that validation when they do achieve what they're wanting to, that they do get that recognition. But also if they fail, that we can unwrap what happened in that journey for failure, and then give them the tools to be able to make better choices later on. Because if it wasn't for my schooling journey doing that, then I think I would have ended up in a very different place. We did a time capsule in year 7 and 8, and in my time capsule I put in there that I wanted to be a fashion designer, because I loved all the luxury brands, and it was all in like uppercase, lowercase letters, and I was just being probably very silly. But I didn't have a lot of ambition for myself back then, and I think the confusion around what to do after was a very big anxiety point right from year 7 through high school. So helping our young people digest what that looks like, and helping them along that journey will serve them much, much better in the future. So thank you all again for having me, and if anyone has any questions, please let me know, and I'm really welcome to answering them. Thank you so much.
I think you'll all agree Ezel is phenomenal, and if you've got any students who think that university is the only way, tell them Ezel's story. The code should be up there if you would like to plug some questions for Ezel into the app. I'm just fascinated to know, Ezel, while they do that, how you transform yourself from that self-described anxious teenager to someone who's calm in the face of 12,000 things going wrong at once.
It's something that you never get taught, and it's something that I think by just jumping in the deep end after I left high school, it helped me in that journey. The first time something went wrong, I looked at it and said, okay, this is going to be detrimental. It's actually quite funny. So a lot of you know Gareth Morgan. He's a big economist in New Zealand. Okay, so Gareth said, I'm going to invest in the company. This was a story very early on. We went, okay, this is amazing. Like, we just got investment from Gareth. This is crazy. And he said, I'm going to give it to you on 3 tranches. So you'll get the first lot now and you'll get 2 lots later on. And we said, okay. After the first round, he pulled out. So he said, I don't believe in the business. This is going nowhere. And we were in Seattle at that point. So at 18, I moved from Wellington to Seattle. It was the biggest change of my life. And we were in Seattle with my co-founder, and we said, okay, we can't do this anymore. Like, there's no way. We sat on that for about a month and then realised, actually, we are the creators of our own destiny. How do we change this thing around? And we got one major contract. So it wasn't until we got that contract for America's Cup that everything started changing. So that one big detrimental thing that we thought would ruin the company and our vision and everything that we'd worked for actually turned out to be a massive blessing in disguise. So ever since then, I've always looked at adversity or changes and hardships and gone, actually, it's all in my hands. I'm the controller of my own future. Yeah.
Well, the other bonus was you didn't have to work with Gareth Morgan.
Oh,
so.
Yeah.
I've had personal dealings with them. I'll tell you that story, anyone who wants to approach me directly. You told us about there being few women in your industry and I guess that being out there at 18 could be kind of a lonely journey. Have you got some inspirations or some allies along the way that you could tell us about?
Absolutely. So for me, it was actually the men in my journey that helped me, and the woman, of course. But we had 2 product developers, one from Xero and one from Trade Me, and they really took me under their wing, because it's really you can only get the help that you request. And so for a lot of young people, and at that time, and I'd like to say this, we think we know it all, but we don't. And I was the first person to raise my hand and say, I don't know these things, can you help me? And it wasn't until I reached for that help that I got that help back in troves. So I would again work all day and then spend 2-3 hours at night with these people while they helped me through that process. So it was really with the help and support of the people around me. But it is very lonely. I think there's only a handful of female tech entrepreneurs in New Zealand, and a handful again globally. But that change is coming, and it's with the men and women that we have in our journeys that help us the most. So if you do have a young person that's wanting to get into technology, please help foster that curiosity, help foster the failures that they'll go along the way, and also the wins, celebrate with them as well. And it was only because of that, it was only because how open my industry was and helping me that I've been able to have the skills that I have now, and developing a company with fewer mistakes.
Lou Matthews-Ward would like to know, how can we encourage more girls into STEM subjects? How can we go back to the 80s where lots of women were doing it?
Yeah, for sure. I get this question a lot, and it's a great question to be asking. And I ask myself this question a lot. The one thing that we can help them with is, if we don't know the answer to a question, to tell them that we don't know the answer. I wanted to get into technology, and I asked my parents for advice, or I asked people around me for advice, and they'd always go, I don't know about that industry, I don't know about technology, it seems all very hard, you should probably not get into it. So I was discouraged to get into technology even before I'd got there. Only because of no other fault than the people that I was asking didn't know about what the technology industry was. And for the young person trying to figure out what they want to do, having somebody say, actually, you shouldn't be doing that, can have a very big effect. And I still remember very, very vividly, and I have to think back to this, is I would ask people for advice after I left high school into what I could be doing at university. And I could never get a straight answer. So just even things like, what did you do? What degree did you take? It was a very blanket response to go onto the Vic Uni website and go onto the directory and go through the list of careers and degrees available, which is a absolute cluster mess. Absolute cluster. Like, it's just, as a young person, just doing your 5 major subjects and going into advanced theory of geographical sciences is not the right tools to make an informed decision on things that you want to do. So put them into areas and give them resources to be able to make those decisions more calculated.
You told us how you dealt with that one vocal doubter who was on your board, but have you ever had to deal with some of the self-doubt as well? Because you seem so confident and you've achieved obviously so much, but I wonder what the little voice inside of you sometimes says to you.
Oh, it's crazy. We have this very, and I'm sure a lot of us in this room would have felt, is that imposter syndrome. So I shouldn't be here. Why am I elected to be doing this? I can't do that. And to that, I remember the first time I spoke, it was hilarious. So I'd been booked in for a 30-minute talk at the Summer of Tech, so talking about technology. And I was so nervous. I had this sheet of paper in my hand that I was reading from, and I was sweating like everywhere, like just every single pore in my body was just like, bleh. And I was shaking like a leaf and reading this piece of paper. I talk for all of 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and then open the floor up for questions. And it wasn't until the questions came in that I actually, I was like, oh, okay, now I can like bloom, because these are my people. They're asking technology questions. This is what I'm good at. And then we ended up having a conversation there. But oftentimes we, as young people, we don't put up our hand for things. We go, no, this person is more qualified to be doing it. I don't deserve that. Why has my company picked me to go and represent us in another country? I have girlfriends and friends call me all the time going, my company has given me this opportunity, but I don't feel like I should be the one to take that. I don't feel deserving. And I always go back to them and say, well, if not you, then who? If not you, then who else in the company? And they think and they go, well, actually, no, I'm the most qualified. So, well, you just answered your own question. You know, we spend so much time developing our experience and our drive and our passion, but then when somebody gives us that baton, it's, do we take the baton and stop, or do we take the baton and run? And I always say to young people, what's the absolute worst that can happen? What would have been the absolute worst thing, me starting Story at 18? What would have been the worst detrimental thing in the world? Probably nothing. No one would have really suffered if I hadn't have started Story or gone to university. Probably my parents, but that's fine. They're very happy now. But what's the very worst that can happen? And I ask myself that question all the time. If I don't do this, actually the worst thing that can happen is not realising my self-potential and driving myself. And I always say there's no growth in a comfortable place. If you're comfortable, then there's no personal growth. So put ourselves in these situations that test us to our full ability and then learn along the way.
Well, I guess, and if you're asking yourself what's the worst that can happen and you can live with that, then you can take some of the fear out of it and just go get it.
Exactly.
Is there anyone from Nelson Girls here?
Yay.
Awesome.
Cool.
That's awesome. What amazing alumni you've got right here. Please put your hands together, everybody, for Ezel.